Born to fail, bred to survive. From these streets to the heights I'll thrive.
Life wasn't easy, but I made it mine.
Chapter 3. Maryland Family Life. Cynthia, kids, and the tech jump. Cynthia Jackson was a breath of fresh air after the Amy Aziz mess, like stepping out of a smoke-filled room into a cool breeze. I met her at Hammerjack's, that legendary Baltimore rock bar, where the music was loud, the drinks were cheap, and the crowd was a mix of metalheads and misfits. It was one of those nights where I was still nursing the hangover from the breakup, post-breakup haze hanging over me like bad cologne, making everything feel a little fuzzy and regrettable. I was just turning 21, still raw from the Amy drama, trying to shake off the weight of that failed relationship. Hammerjack's was my escape. Dim lights, thumping bass, and strangers who didn't know my story. Cynthia stood out immediately. She was a few years older than me, born February 23rd, 1966, with this loud, infectious laugh that cut through the noise like a siren. No filter on her at all. She'd say whatever popped into her head, and it was refreshing after all the games I'd been through. She called herself a hippie, obsessed with the Grateful Dead, tie-dye shirts, and that free-spirited vibe. We hit it off fast, leaning against the sticky bar, talking over cheap beers about music, life, and whatever bullshit came up. Her energy pulled me in. She wasn't trying to fix me or figure me out. She was just there, real and unapologetic. At the time, I was still crashing in that apartment near Amy in Pikesville, Maryland. There was a leftover from our time together, close to her mom's company where I'd been working, but now that we were done, relationship over, job gone, there was nothing tying me down. Money was getting tight. I wasn't pulling steady work, framing houses here and there, but the bills were stacking up. Cynthia was gearing up for a move herself. Her mom had just gone through a divorce and bought a townhouse in Crofton, Maryland, a solid 3-bedroom spot with a basement. Cynthia and her friend Tweety, real name Alyssa, were set to move in, splitting the place. As Cindy and I started dating, the conversation naturally turned to me joining them. It made sense. I didn't have a ton of options. The rent would be cheap, and hell, I liked her. We talked it out over late-night drives and diner coffee, me ditching the Pikesville pad, packing up my stuff, and starting fresh in Crofton. It felt like a practical step, not some romantic leap, but sometimes that's how life pushes you forward. The move to a new life. The move itself was a comedy of errors, the kind that sticks with you for the laughs later. I'd bought this big 1-ton step van from my dad, beat up but reliable, or so I thought. The day we loaded it up with my boxes, furniture scraps, and whatever else I owned, we hit the road toward Crofton. Traffic jammed up out of nowhere on the highway, and I had to downshift hard to avoid rear-ending the car in front. Boom! The engine blew right there, smoke billowing out like a bad omen. I cursed under my breath, pulling over to the shoulder as cars honked past. Missed that truck ever since. It had character, even if it crapped out on me at the worst time. We ended up towing it, scrambling to get my stuff to the new place. But we made it. Once I was moved in, things settled quick. The townhouse was cozy. Not fancy, but functional. Upstairs bedrooms, a basement for storage or whatever, and that suburban Maryland feel with quiet streets and neighbors who minded their own business. I don't ever remember having a separate bedroom from the jump. Pretty sure I started sharing one with Cindy right from day one, our stuff mingling in drawers and closets like we'd been together forever. It was casual, no big declaration, just how it shook out. Tweety was cool at first, crashing in her own room, the three of us figuring out the roommate dynamic. We'd cook meals together, blast music, and hang out like a weird little family. But jealousy crept in eventually, the way it does in tight quarters. Tweety and Cindy were tight friends, but with me in the mix, lines blurred. There were moments where things got flirty with Tweety. Young and dumb has its perks, and they both knew about it. Didn't seem to care at first. Felt weird, like I was walking a tightrope, but I was still hung up on Amy deep down. Cindy knew I had lingering feelings for her. I'd talk about it sometimes, the what-ifs and regrets. I wasn't looking to dive into something serious, but life has a way of forcing your hand. Tensions built subtle digs, awkward silences, and I had to make a call, stay with Cindy, explore things with Tweety, or bail altogether. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. In the end, Cindy got pregnant with Moriah, and that sealed it. No more games. We were in this now. Wrapping up old business. Settling into the Crofton townhouse felt like turning a page, but loose ends from my past were still flapping in the wind. This entire time, believe it or not, I was technically still married to Melissa. We'd never bothered with a divorce after our messy split back in my early 20s. Life had moved on. She'd faded into the background, and I'd thrown myself into work. Amy, and now Cindy. But old ties don't snap clean without a nudge. Melissa had started dating Walt Anderson, an old childhood friend of hers. Typical Baltimore tough guy, the type who probably saw himself as her knight in shining armor. They got serious quick, talking marriage, kids, the whole picket fence dream. To make it official, she filed for divorce, papers landing in my mailbox like a ghost from a bad dream. I don't remember the details dragging out. Court dates blur together, but I do recall her boyfriend, Walt, calling me up one night, full of piss and vinegar. Phone rings in the townhouse. Cindy's in the kitchen making dinner, and I pick up to this voice on the line, all accusatory and puffed up. "You need to sign those papers, man. Stop dragging your feet. Melissa deserves better than you." He laid into me with a bunch of shit, rehashing old fights, calling me a deadbeat for not handling it sooner. I bit my tongue, kept it civil, mostly because I didn't give a damn anymore. Melissa was ancient history, a chapter I'd closed long ago. Hung up, tossed the phone down, and told Cindy about it over pasta. She just shrugged. Let 'em have their happily ever after. A few days later, I signed the papers at a notary's office, scribbling my name with zero fanfare. No regrets, no fireworks. Just ink on paper putting Melissa in the rearview mirror for good. Felt like shedding dead weight, clearing space for whatever came next. With that knot untied, the path with Cindy felt less cluttered, even if it was still a bumpy ride. Getting married. We decided to make the plunge and get married, but it was no fairy tale. Just two people figuring out life with a baby on the way. No fancy wedding. We did it at the courthouse in Baltimore, quick and no frills. I remember Cindy floating the idea of a ceremony at the Renaissance Festival. She loved that medieval vibe, jousting and costumes and all. But her dad shot it down hard. He was a no-nonsense type, said he wasn't paying for something like that, and we couldn't swing it on our own. Wouldn't have been that expensive, but money was tight, so courthouse it was. Signed the papers, exchanged rings, and that was that. She worked at a local cable company back then, pulling long shifts, installing lines, or handling customer calls, while I was out framing houses, sweat-drenched days on job sites, hammering nails and barking orders to crews. We were both grinding, patching together a life from paychecks and late nights. Things weren't perfect. Fights over small stuff, stress from the pregnancy. But we had a rhythm, a shared beat that kept us moving. Just before Moriah arrived in July 1990, we squeezed in this wild road trip that summed up Cindy's hippie spirit. It was 1989, I think, and she was a die-hard Deadhead, following the Grateful Dead like a religion. We decided to chase a tour stop, or at least hit their big show at Alpine Valley in Wisconsin, rented an RV, me, Cindy, and her friend Tracy, another short, pretty deadhead who got along with everyone. The three of us piled in, stocked with snacks and excitement, and hit the road. It was my first real taste of that nomadic vibe. Highways stretching out, rest stops blurring by, the hum of the engine lulling you into a trance. I wasn't a full-on hippie, never was into that lifestyle, but Cindy got me into the music. I appreciated the Grateful Dead sound as a musician myself. Those two drummers laying down intricate rhythms, Jerry Garcia's guitar weaving through it all like magic. The concert at Alpine Valley was insane. Thousands of fans in a sea of tie-dye, the air thick with patchouli and pot smoke. We parked the RV in the lot, which turned into a mud pit after days of rain. Tents everywhere, people slipping around in the slop, but we were golden. Generator humming, fridge stocked, dry and comfortable, while the hippies glared at us like we were sellouts. I didn't care. I was always the over-prepared type, not about to rough it when I didn't have to. That trip was a blur of firsts for me. I'd never been big on drugs my whole life. Steered clear after seeing too much destruction growing up, but I started smoking weed around then, just before the trip. It chilled me out, unlike booze, which I ditched after my late teens because it made everything too chaotic and out of control. On the road, though, I tried mushrooms a couple times, all during that week. Didn't do much for me. Some mild visuals, a giggly haze, but nothing earth-shattering. Never felt the urge to dive deeper. The real magic was the show itself. Laying under the stars on a blanket with Cindy and Tracy, the band's jams echoing across the valley, lights pulsing like a living thing. Jerry's solos would build and twist, the crowd swaying as one, and for those hours, the world felt infinite. We'd dance barefoot in the grass, lose ourselves in the music, then crash back at the RV with stories and laughter. It was only about a week, short-lived adventure, but unforgettable. Back home, it was straight to reality. Work, bills, and prepping for the baby. But that trip, it bonded us, gave us a shared memory in the midst of all the grinding. Family was starting to take shape, even if it was messy. New career with old ties. Moriah came first, bursting into our world on July 7th, 1990, the exact same day and month as my mom's birthday, which felt like some cosmic nod. Or maybe just a weird coincidence that made family gatherings a double celebration. Little firecracker from the start, dark hair matted down, big curious eyes scanning the room like she was already sizing up the chaos, and lungs that could wake the dead. Her birth wasn't some quick, movie-style delivery. It dragged on for what felt like forever. Almost 2 full days of labor at the hospital in Baltimore. Cindy was tough, but the pain hit her hard. Contractions rolling in like waves, sweat beading on her forehead, gripping my hand until my fingers went numb. I paced the sterile room, the beeps of monitors and muffled cries from other rooms echoing in my head, trying to advocate for her. I'd flagged down nurses and doctors saying, "Hey, she's really hurting here, can't you do something?" But they brushed me off, rude as hell with that clinical detachment. "This is childbirth, sir. It's supposed to hurt." Made me boil inside. I wanted to grab one by the scrubs and shake some empathy into them. Looking back, it was my first real taste of that powerless feeling as a soon-to-be dad. Watching someone you care about suffer and not being able to fix it. The whole experience was eye-opening, intense in a way I'd never felt before. I was right there in the delivery room for it all, no fainting or bailing like some guys do. When Moriah finally arrived, the doctor handed me the scissors to cut the cord. That slippery, pulsing lifeline, severing with a snip that echoed in my chest. It was surreal, holding this tiny, wriggling human we'd made, her cries filling the room like a victory shout. I'd end up doing the same for all 5 of my kids, Eli, Carter, and later the 2 with my second wife. Each birth a raw, bloody miracle that bonded me to them instantly. In that hazy post-birth glow, amid the exhaustion and adrenaline crash, I had this fleeting thought. Maybe I should become a doctor. It hit me hard, serious enough that I mulled it over for days. The precision of the medical team, the way they handled life and death with tools and knowledge, it sparked something. I knew I had the brains for it. Hell, I'd always been quick to learn, capable of wrapping my head around complex shit if I put my mind to it. But reality slapped me back quick. 8 years of med school, the crushing debt, the time away from family. Wasn't feasible. Not with a newborn on the way and bills stacking up. Still, that moment planted a seed, making me question my path. I'd been in construction my whole life, framing houses, swinging hammers, breathing sawdust since I was a teen working with Dan. It was what I knew, solid blue-collar work, but I felt this itch for more, something that used my head as much as my hands. At the time, I was hustling in a cabinet shop during the week, crafting custom pieces in a dusty warehouse that smelled like fresh-cut wood and varnish, and picking up side gigs building a few houses on weekends, measuring twice, cutting once, turning blueprints into reality. Pay was decent but inconsistent, no benefits, which bit us hard with Moriah's arrival. We didn't have health insurance back then, so the hospital bill landed like a gut punch, around $18,000 staring back at us from that stack of papers. I remember sitting at the kitchen table in our Crofton townhouse, Cindy nursing Moriah in the next room, crunching numbers on a notepad until my eyes blurred. How the hell were we going to pay that off? It lit a fire under me. I needed stability, a job with a steady paycheck and coverage for the family. No more scraping by on freelance gigs. We had a kid now, responsibilities that outweighed the freedom of being my own boss. It was around then that I reconnected with Wayne, my biological father, after years of spotty contact. We drifted in and out, those awkward secret visits as a kid, then radio silence through my teens and early 20s. But something pulled us back together. Maybe it was fatherhood, making me reflect on my own roots, or just timing. We started talking more, phone calls turning into lunches, catching up on lost time. Wayne was in insurance sales, had been for years, and he saw potential in me. "Come work with me," he said, painting this picture of suits, commissions, and security. "I'll get you licensed, give you a shot." I figured, why not? Construction was grinding me down, and this could be the change I needed. So I dove in, studied my ass off for the insurance exam, poring over thick manuals on policies, risks, and regulations late into the night while Moriah fussed in her crib. Passed it on the first try. Got my license, and Wayne hooked me up with a job at People's Security Insurance. He was the sales manager for this company. It was a step up, office setting, steady weekly check hitting the bank, and crucially, health insurance for Cindy, Moriah, and me. No more worrying about doctor bills or emergencies wiping us out. But damn, it felt sleazy from day one, like I'd traded my hammer for a con artist's script. The gig was all about cold calls and pushing policies, dialing up strangers, mostly older folks on fixed incomes, spinning tales about protection they didn't need. I'd sit in that cubicle farm, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, phone glued to my ear, trying to upsell worthless add-ons that padded the company's pockets. "Ma'am, this rider will cover you in case of..." It left a bad taste, like I was preying on vulnerability. And Wayne? He turned out to be a real asshole up close, bad temper flaring over nothing, snide comments that cut deep, like he was compensating for all those missed years by being a prick. I remember one evaluation meeting clear as day. I'd hit some sales targets, so they gave me this cheesy award. 2 pens shaped like a hammer and a nail, engraved with something like, "Nailing down profits, hammering home sales." I chuckled, made a joke about the irony. Here I am, fresh out of construction, starting in insurance, and my first award is a hammer and nail. Wayne leaned back in his chair, smirking, and fired back. Maybe that's a sign. It landed like a slap, implying I belonged back on the job site, not in his world. Bothered me to my core, festering overnight. The next week, I quit. Walked in, slapped my resignation on his desk, and didn't look back. No regrets. Integrity over a paycheck any day. Cindy backed me fully. "Do what feels right," she said, and we scraped by until I landed back in framing. That stint with Wayne? Short-lived lesson in what I didn't want, but it closed one door and cracked open others. Back to the grind. After quitting the insurance gig with Wayne, no looking back, no second thoughts, I jumped right back into what I knew best: construction. The hammer felt like an old friend in my hand again, the smell of fresh-cut lumber and sawdust clearing my head. I wasn't going solo this time, though. I partnered up with one of Cindy's friends, Arlin Bleclic. He went by Butch. Butch and I clicked fast and became damn good friends over the next couple of years. He was a big son of a bitch, about 6 feet 5 inches, pushing 260 pounds, built like a linebacker who'd never missed a meal. Steady as hell, always showed up on time, had reliable transportation, worked his ass off without complaint. Nicest guy in the world most days. Quick with a laugh, helped anyone who needed it. But he had that same edge I did. Push him too far, and he could flip into an asshole mode that matched mine perfectly. We balanced each other out. I'd bark orders, he'd back me up with quiet muscle, and together we got shit done. We hooked up with a solid construction outfit that specialized in large custom homes. Full ground-up builds, not the production framing I'd done before. These were big projects, sprawling houses with fancy details, multi-level designs, custom roofs, the works. It was a step up in scale and pay, though still competitive as hell. We put together a tight crew, hired an experienced carpenter to show me the tricks I didn't know yet, like advanced layout techniques, efficient bracing, and how to read plans that made my head spin at first. Butch and I learned fast, running the show on site. We were often running, meaning we'd hustle from one build to the next, barely catching our breath. I remember one stretch that tested us hard. We were framing one house in a cul-de-sac development with about 10 homes going up at once. The other crews got fired. Sloppy work, missed deadlines, whatever the reason. And the general contractor came to us. "Can you take over the remaining 5? We scrambled like mad, hired extra hands on the spot, pulled all-nighters, juggled materials deliveries while keeping the quality up, knocked it out without a hitch. That year alone, we framed over 100 houses, plus a couple of large apartment buildings. Tough, back-breaking work. Sun up to sundown, rain or shine, hands callous to leather. But the checks cleared, and we built a reputation for reliability. Pay wasn't extravagant, but it beat the insurance grind. We kept hustling, always one job ahead of the bills. The original homestead. During this grind, Butch and I started dreaming bigger. We talked about getting our own property, building something from the ground up on our terms. That's when we connected with my neighbor, Robert Fisher. Bob, we called him. Older black guy in his 60s, worked some top-secret government role. Never asked details, he didn't offer. Really overweight but sharp as hell, and a genuinely nice dude. Fit right in with us, could be the sweetest guy 1 minute, then the biggest asshole if you crossed him. The 3 of us clicked. We pooled resources and bought about 40 acres of timberland in Fork Union, Virginia. Plan was simple: clear the land, build 3 houses, one for each of us, turn it into something we owned outright. Butch and I moved down there full-time for the project. Bought a trailer to live in on site, a small yard crane, a bulldozer, and rented a lift when we needed height. For about 6 months, it was just us against the wilderness. We put in roads ourselves, grading dirt, laying gravel, cleared acres of timber, cutting down trees, pushing them over with the dozer, limbing them, barking them up, stacking logs for the trucks that rolled in to haul them out. Hard, dirty work, but it felt good. Watching raw land turn into something usable, building equity with our own hands. The plan was humming along until Bob passed away suddenly. Heart attack or something. Hit us all hard. His son got involved after that. And everything unraveled fast. Legal headaches, family disputes, money disagreements. The project fell apart, and we had to walk away from the property. Lost time, sweat, and a chunk of cash. But that's how it goes sometimes. You roll the dice. Sometimes you crap out. Carrying on. Back in Maryland, the daily grind kept rolling. Some weeks we were flush, money coming in steady from builds and side renovation projects. Other months we were broke as hell, scraping to pay rent and feed the kids. Ups and downs were normal, but we pushed through. Personal life was getting more layered now with 2 kids in the house, Moriah toddling everywhere, Eli not far behind, and my mother resurfacing in a big way. Mom had married Sam Oldacker years earlier. Sam was a great guy, an old West Virginia hillbilly type, never really got mad. Dependable as sunrise. He'd been the one holding things together with her prescription pill addiction, dealing with the chaos, the overdoses, the hospital runs. But even Sam hit his limit. They'd gotten into financial trouble, debts piling up, Mom's habits draining everything, and she was overdosing again. The usual cycle. I couldn't watch from afar anymore. So I renovated our basement into a mother-in-law apartment. Drywall, flooring, basic kitchenette, the works. And Sam and Mom moved in with us. Sam started working with me on the crews, swinging a hammer, pulling his weight. We went through the whole ugly detox cycle again, getting her off the pills, doctor visits, withdrawal shakes, the screaming fights when the cravings hit. It was brutal watching her suffer, trying to keep the kids shielded from it. But we got her stabilized. They stayed about 6 months, long enough for her to level out, and for Cindy to get a front row seat to the addiction nightmare she'd only heard about before. This was probably the first real exposure Cindy had to my mother's issues up close. The lies, the manipulation, the way pills turned a person into someone unrecognizable. It strained things between us, no question, but we powered through. Eventually, Mom and Sam found an apartment nearby and moved out. Relief washed over the house like fresh air, but the scars lingered. Family ties, messy, painful, but unbreakable. A shocking tale. I remember one time we landed this massive project, one of the bigger ones Butch and I ever tackled. We were contracted to build a new facade across the entire length of a shopping center in Brooklyn Park, Maryland. The same Brooklyn Park where I'd grown up, where life had thrown some of its earliest punches. Right there in the old neighborhood, the spot where I'd crashed that orange van into a cop's truck back in my wilder days. The cabinet shop where I'd sweated through shifts, learning to measure twice and cut once, and literally next door to Brooklyn Park High School, the place I'd walked out of and never looked back. Standing on those rooftops, hammering steel and screwing panels under the Maryland sun, it felt like the past was staring right up at me. Full circle, almost poetic if you ignored the dust and the sweat stinging your eyes. The job required most of the work at night to avoid disrupting shoppers. Scaffolding up after closing, lights rigged like a construction Christmas tree, the hum of generators and power tools cutting through the quiet hours. We'd knock out sections during the day when we could, but the bulk happened under floodlights, turning the strip mall into our personal battlefield. One afternoon, broad daylight, me up on the roof balancing on joists, new DeWalt screw gun in hand, I get a call from Cindy. She always had a flair for the dramatic, over-exaggerating every little crisis like the world was ending. Phone buzzes in my pocket, I answer, and she's in full panic mode. Arlin. Eli just got taken to the hospital in an ambulance. He was standing on the air conditioner vent in the floor, stuck some keys in an electrical socket, and got electrocuted. My stomach dropped like a lead weight. Eli, my little Christmas baby, not even walking long, curious as hell, was hurt? Electrocuted? Visions flashed. Tiny hands, sparks, ambulance lights. I didn't think. I just reacted. Dropped the screw gun right off the roof. Clattered down 3 stories. Tools didn't matter. I scrambled down the ladder, hard hammering louder than any nail gun. Told Butch what was up, and peeled out in the truck toward the hospital. Rushed into the ER, mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Burns, heart issues, permanent damage. Nurses pointed me to the room, and there he was. Eli, sitting up in the bed, a little pale but wide-eyed, munching on a popsicle like nothing happened. Turns out it was a shock. Yeah, enough to knock him back and scare the hell out of everyone, but no serious injury. Kid's a rubber. He bounced. Doctors checked him over, said he'd be fine, maybe a little tingly for a day. Relief hit me like a wave, knees weak, but I played it cool for Cindy. She was still shaking, eyes red, holding him tight. I hugged them both, whispered thanks to whatever force kept him safe. From that day on, Butch never let it go. Every time Eli showed up on a job site or we'd talk about the kids, Butch would grin that big grin and call him Sparky. How's Sparky doing today? It stuck like glue, affectionate ribbing that masked the scare we all felt. Even now, thinking about it, my chest tightens. Fatherhood doesn't come with a manual, and moments like that remind you how fragile the whole thing is. One socket, one curious toddler, and everything could change in a heartbeat. But he was okay. We were okay. And we kept building facades, families, futures, one nail, one scare, one laugh at a time. Another career change. My friend Ray Dickinson, not the Ray from my childhood scraps and BMX races, a different guy altogether, worked for the NSA and sparked my dive into tech. He was deep into technology and security, living in Maryland where the government's always got its nose in everything, sniffing around data like hounds on a trail. Ray and his wife Linda were actually Cindy's friends at first, met through some mutual circle, maybe a bar or a backyard cookout. But Ray and I hit it off quick. He was a service veteran, a linguist who'd served on submarines during his military days, decoding whispers in the deep while I was out swinging hammers. Now he was at the National Security Agency, buried in classified shit I never asked about. And here I was, a high school dropout, turned contractor, covered in sawdust and sweat. Worlds apart. But we bonded over gadgets and ideas. We'd grab beers after work, talk about the future, how computers were changing everything, security protocols, early networks. Ray saw potential in me, said my problem-solving from job sites could translate to code. You're quick, Arlin. Why stick to nails when you can build digital empires? It planted a seed, made me curious about this tech wave crashing in. That's how we cooked up the touchscreen kiosk idea for a local department store, way ahead of its time, back when most folks were still poking at keyboards like cavemen. This was around 93 or 94, Windows 3.1 ruling the roost, and Video for Windows, VFW, had just dropped, Microsoft's first stab at handling video on PCs without needing fancy hardware. Touchscreens? Barely a thing outside sci-fi movies. People thought you were nuts, suggesting shoppers could poke a screen for info. But Ray and I saw it, an interactive stand in the mall, guiding folks around the store like a digital concierge. I hustled the pitch, cold called the store manager, sketched rough ideas on napkins, sold it on how it'd boost foot traffic and sales. Landed the deal, our first real tech gig. Ray was supposed to handle the coding, starting in Visual Basics, but he dragged his feet. Busy with NSA crap, excuses piling up. I got impatient, downloaded some shareware tools myself, tinkered on an old 386 PC running Windows in my basement, crashed it a dozen times, cursed like a sailor, but pieced together a rough prototype. Basic buttons, simple navigation. When Ray saw it, he felt the heat, lit a fire under his ass, and stepped up. We finished it in Visual Basics, polishing the interface late nights in his garage, coffee going cold. The kiosk was slick for its era. Interactive store map you could zoom and pan, rotating ads popping up like billboards, department overviews with photos, even printable coupons spitting out from a built-in printer. To make the video elements pop, we grabbed camcorders, borrowed from friends, and filmed footage around the store, aisles of clothes, toy sections, checkout lines, the whole vibe. Converted it all to VFW format, compressing files so they wouldn't choke the slow hardware, syncing audio clips of store jingles. I handled the hardware side, using my carpentry skills to craft a custom wooden enclosure, sturdy oak, stained dark, with recessed edges to mount the touchscreen flush, like it was built into a podium. Wired in the coupon printer, dot matrix beast that jammed half the time, rigged speakers for sound effects, bolted it together in my workshop, tools scattered like old friends. We hauled it to the mall, plugged it in, and it ran smooth for a few months. Shoppers poking away, kids printing coupons for candy, managers grinning at the novelty. We were pumped, dreaming of rolling it out nationwide, franchising the idea. Guess what? The store chain filed for bankruptcy not long after. Poof. Project dead. Lost the touchscreen hardware in the shuffle. Ray ate a chunk on his credit card for parts. Sucked, but that failure hooked me deep. Technology wasn't just a side hustle, it was the future, and I wanted a piece. You can't succeed without failing. The kiosk flop didn't kill the buzz, it amped it. I got hooked on AOL around then, those free trial CDs flooding mailboxes like junk mail gold. Pop one in, dial up that screeching modem handshake, and bam, the internet opened up. Rich media demos blew my mind. Clips of the moon landing playing smooth. Neil Armstrong's One Small Step for Man, One Giant Leap for Mankind, echoing from tinny speakers. It wasn't just text. It was video, sound, worlds colliding on a screen. Made me rethink everything construction was physical, limited by weather and crews, but tech? Infinite scale. I started researching ISPs obsessively, late nights after the kids crashed, poring over magazines like Byte and PC World, dialing BBS forums for tips. Figured if I could build houses, I could build networks. Rented a dingy building in downtown Baltimore, old brick spot with creaky floors, smelled like dust and opportunity. Got an upstream connection from a local provider, T1 line humming in, and launched my own ISP, InVision Systems Incorporated. Named it after envisioning the future. Cheesy, but fitting. Started small, selling dial-up access to locals hungry for that online fix. Learning curve was steep as hell. I dove into Linux, Red Hat or Slackware distros back then. Command line black magic that made my head spin at first. Installed it on spare boxes, configuring servers from scratch. Apache for web hosting, SendMail for email, all via VI editor and man pages. Windows, NT Server was just emerging too. Early 90s release. so I tinkered with that for user-friendly stuff. NT 3.1 or 3.5. Clunky, but stable for file shares. Bought these old serial port concentrators. Think they were called digiboards, or something similar. Multi-port boxes that hooked into Ethernet. You'd daisy-chain them. Plug-in racks of modems. Started with 11. Scaled to 20 US robotics beasts. Blinking lights filling the room like a sci-fi set. Customers dialed in at 28.8 kilobits per second. Maybe 56K later. Surfing at snail speeds by today's standards, but revolutionary then. Hard to snag customers at first. $20 a month for unlimited access. But folks were skeptical. Why pay for email when I got the phone? I'd demo AOL chats, early web pages, hook 'em with free trials. Then HDSL hit like a gold rush. High-bit rate digital subscriber line, using dry alarm pairs in those ancient Baltimore buildings. No voice lines needed. Just twisted copper pairs phone companies had. Lying dormant. Pioneered it locally. Convinced the telco to patch pairs for $15 a month per circuit. Bought a $1,000 router. Bridged them for T1 equivalent speeds. 1.544 megabits per second symmetric. Cheap as dirt compared to leased lines costing thousands. I'd charge customers $2,000 a month for that pipe. Pure profit after overhead. Businesses jumped on it. Small offices needing fast email, file transfers without the dial-up wait. InVision grew. Racks of servers whirring, fans humming like a beehive. Learned Cold Fusion on the fly. Alair's early web dev tool. Built dynamic sites, shopping carts, databases talking to front end. Landed Mattel as a client somehow. Cold pitch turned gig. Crafted their first Barbie website. Custom e-com with pink overload. Secure carts. As secure as 90s tech got. Paid real money. Validated the pivot. Kids loved the office. Moriah and Eli playing hide-and-seek around server towers. Carter cooing in a playpen while I debugged code. Cynthia rolled her eyes at my all-nighters. Another late one? But the money flowed better than framing gigs. Family life chugged along. Kids growing wild. Moriah hitting school with backpack drama. Eli a toddling tornado of energy. Carter the quiet watcher absorbing it all. Fights with Cynthia simmered. Money stress, my obsessions. But we had a rhythm. Offbeat and uneven. Keeping the ship afloat. That Maryland chapter wrapped up like a long, hard shift, finally clocking out. Framing marathons that left my hands raw and my back screaming. The insurance flop with Wayne that tasted like betrayal and bad decisions. The kiosk experiment that crashed and burned before it could take flight. And then the ISP launch rising from the ashes like something we actually built ourselves. Through all the pivots and failures, the one constant, the real win, was my kids. Moriah, Eli, Carter. They were my anchors in the storm. Tiny humans who kept me tethered when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Their laughter echoing through the house, their small hands grabbing at my shirt after a long day. The way they'd crash asleep on the couch while I debugged code at 2 a.m. Fuck the rest. They grounded me, reminded me why I kept pushing, even when the money was tight and the nights were long. A new era. By then, Butch and I were quietly phasing out the construction side. The framing crews had been reliable, but the grind was wearing thin, and the tech wave felt unstoppable. Butch was finishing up one last big personal project, a new house for his parents, right on the Severn River. Gorgeous spot. Water views, custom everything. The kind of build that made you proud to swing a hammer one more time. He'd oversee the final touches, make sure it was perfect for them, while I poured everything into InVision Systems. Butch still helped in his spare time, showing up at the office to troubleshoot servers, haul equipment, or just shoot the shit while we watched logs scroll across screens. He was one of the smartest guys I ever knew. had actually taken computer science in college back when most people thought that was nerd territory, so on paper, he knew more theory than I ever would. But I was the hands-on guy, always had been. I'd tear apart hardware, solder connections, figure out why a modem bank was dropping calls at 3 a.m., while he handled the cleaner logic side. Together, we made it work. Him with the structured brain, me with the street-smart instincts that refused to quit. Our routine had shifted hard. Gone were the dawn truck loads, the tool cleanup at dusk, the crews yelling over saws and nail guns. Now it was two former construction guys crammed into a high-rise office in downtown Baltimore. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, servers humming in racks like they were alive, coffee going cold on cluttered desks. We looked out of place at first, calloused hands on keyboards, work boots under dress pants we'd half-asked for client meetings. Felt like imposters some days, running a company in a world we barely understood when we started. But we learned fast, crashed hard, got back up faster. Linux configs at midnight, Windows Server tweaks at dawn, modem pools blinking like Christmas lights. This was the future as we saw it, not swinging hammers. Forever, but building something digital that could scale without breaking our backs. We pressed forward, eyes wide open, no safety net. Just the belief that if we could frame a house from dirt, we could frame a business from code. Looking back, that transition marked the real turning point. Construction had been survival, steady, physical, predictable in its pain. Tech was riskier, wilder, full of unknowns that could wipe you out or launch you. But it promised more. Freedom, scale, a shot at something bigger than paychecks and sunburn. Butch and I rode that wave together until life pulled us different directions. But those garage-to-office days, they shaped everything that came after. Maryland gave me the scars, the lessons, the family that kept me human. And when the next chapter called, new states, new ventures, new heartbreaks, I carried all of it forward, still anchored by those 3 kids, still bred to survive whatever came next. End. Chapter 3.